My name is Biju Matthew. I'm part of the Lamakaan Executive Committee. And on behalf of Lamakaan, welcome to the Hasan Memorial Lecture, our 5th Hasan Memorial Lecture, which is Lamakaan's flagship lecture that happens every year on the 15th of August, unless of course it's a Monday, in which case we're closed. And then it happens either on the Sunday or the Tuesday. And every single year, Lamakaan's Hasan Memorial Lecture, its flagship lecture, has been aimed at focusing on the emergent political, social world that we are struggling with or against. And the lecture itself is named after Moid Hasan, who is the person we owe it all to. This was his house. And in the world of causality, there's this necessary conditions and sufficient conditions, right? So Lamakaan would not have been a possibility without Hasan Mamu and this house, and it being handed over to run a lovely place like this. And Lamakaan, the spirit of Lamakaan is that it's an open cultural, political space for people to come, exchange ideas, debate, fight over things, create new things, and create a new world, create a new vision. That's the spirit of Lamakaan. We are entirely, almost entirely, except for a few thousand rupees here or there that we get as donations, almost entirely funded through the chai and samosas and the mirchi bhajis. So please, even if you're not hungry, eat as many of them as you can, because that's how we survive. We have a wonderful staff who keep this place going. Kranti, our manager, and the entire kitchen staff, KK, Basant, and everybody else there. They are the people who keep this place going, but we must remember this place is for you, all of you who make this place what it is. It is a space of opposition. It is a space of standing up to power. It is a space of questioning, and we welcome you here in that spirit. Today's Hasan Memorial Lecture is going to be delivered by Siddharth Varadarajan and going to be moderated by Firdaus Soni. I will just introduce Firdaus in a moment and then hand it over to her. Firdaus is a research scholar at the University of Hyderabad, the Central University in Gachibowli, involved deeply with the Rohit Vemula struggle, and her work, her research work, is on pastoral communities, and she is active as a political figure on campus and a person who, let's say, seeks to uncover and push open the questions that are difficult to push open on a campus and in a political environment like we have today. Thanks, Firdaus, for being here with us, and over to you.
Today, on the day that it is today, the 15th of August, I just want to begin this discussion by reiterating a very important moment from our history, which doesn't get recalled or registered as in the mainstream, in the dominant narrative of history, which is in 1972 in Bombay, the Dalit Panther Party observed 15th of August as a black day. They raised black flags, and they said that the tricolor, which doesn't do anything to cover the shame, which doesn't protect our people, it has no meaning to people of this land. So from a moment like that to a moment today where there is so much fear in the air, even now as we say anything which challenges the ruling government, which challenges the idea of nation, which is so violent to so many of the people in this country, we are gripped with fear. We speak, there is no denying to the fact that there is an environment of fear which is systematically created. The repression has always been there. There has always been power. There have been structures of a society which lead to a certain kind of power that we see now. And it has changed its forms, it has changed its modus operandi in today's time. And one struggle definitely is to fight it. At the same time, it's very important to understand what are the modes in which that power operates, what are the modes in which the repression is done, and what are the modes in which resistance can be framed. So 2014 is marked as this watershed moment for our country, where a political entity that claims to want to form a Hindu nation comes to power as the ruling government in this country. And 2014 therefore marks a certain kind of a milestone for the politics of this country, for the people of this country. From 1972 15th August, where people were able to say this out boldly, today we have lynchings that are happening every day. Today we have systematic violence committed on people in the name of cow slaughter, in the name of beef ban, etc. And and there are different spaces of resistance that are coming up. We see that a lot of things in society since then, of course, have changed. The available now we live in an era of internet. Now we live in a space where these forums are also being used to frame a certain resistance. In 2015, Wire was launched as an independent space from which a very clear opposition to power can be, from which a certain kind of a journalism can be presented to the people. In 2015 also we saw spaces like National Doesnt and many other spaces that emerged to address the question, to challenge what was happening to journalism, challenge what has been happening to journalism. And today we have with us Siddharth. I don't think he needs much introduction. A lot of people know who he is. He is the founder and editor, one of the founders and editors of The Wire, which seeks to create a space of independent journalism, which seeks to create a space where journalism can truly stand with the people who are resisting these forces. And so today's discussion is very important, because what we are going to do today is to understand how does the right-wing forces actually use media. What are the ways in which even they are updating, what are the ways in which they are creating popular opinions, etc., and much more. And he will definitely elaborate a lot on that. And so the title, as aptly, the discussion is aptly titled as the next round of Jumlebazi in the context of the upcoming 2019 elections, which will again be probably one of the most important elections that this country will witness. And so the agenda for today's discussion is basically examining Hindutva's media strategy. And without taking much time, I'll hand over the mic to Siddharth. Thank you.
I'm very grateful to Lamakaan for inviting me here for the Hasan Memorial Lecture. I've heard a lot about this place, but to actually see it, and to see it in all its glory with such a great turnout, it's really it's very humbling, and I'm not sure I can measure up to the expectations of everybody who's come here, but I shall give it a shot. The topic that I have before me is really a very vast one. It has many different elements, and what I thought would be useful is not, of course, as a journalist, what concerns me is the place of the media in today's India and in today's politics, and the manner in which the media is used and abused for various agendas. And I will speak about that, and also try to analyze the specific use that the Bharatiya Janata Party and the Sangh Parivar and all the affiliated organizations are making of the media. But that is only a part of the story that I want to tell, part of the analysis that I want to give you, because I think in order to understand the role of the media, why the media does what it does today, in some ways we need to step back and actually understand a little bit about what is happening in national politics, a subject which animates all of you. It's animating everybody. There's a great deal of concern about the political scenario in the country. Governments have come, governments have gone, PMs have come, PMs have gone. But since 2014, some of the changes that we see do appear to be a little out of the ordinary, to put it mildly, and do suggest that the kind of transition that we have been witnessing, or the kind of changes that we've been witnessing over the last 4 years, cannot simply be understood as against the backdrop of governments coming and going, and every party ruling in its own way, every leader finding his or her own voice. There is something else that is fundamentally happening, and we need to understand. And that's what I hope to do by beginning, say, with 2013, 2014, understanding what happened in that election, understanding what's been happening over the last 4 years, zeroing in then on what the elements of Hindutva strategy are today, and its techniques, and of course within that the role of media management. And in conclusion, what I will try to do is to discuss, both as a journalist and as lay public, what we can do in order to defend democracy, in order to defend constitutional values, in order to defend the values that all of us hold dear and which we very closely associate with India. It is my belief, since we are speaking on August 15th, and there was a reference to the flag and what the flag represents, that today the flag of the nation, the flag of India, has actually, has actually been hurled in the mud by those who claim to be its biggest defenders, by those who claim to speak in its name. The language of nationalism is so central to a lot of the political propaganda that we are subjected to today, that it is important that we not allow that flag and not allow that nation, not allow the country to be hijacked by people who are conducting politics, but who are essentially running a business in the name of all of these, in the name of the flag, in the name of the country. So I see today's discussion also as part of that process of the people of the nation recovering the country, not allowing it to be hijacked, not allowing people who don't stand for these values that we cherish to script anew, or to rewrite, or to dictate, or to erase, which is clearly what is very much part of their agenda. But I want to go back to 2014, and we need to understand the circumstances under which the BJP came to power and Narendra Modi became Prime Minister. And essentially his victory, what did it represent in institutional terms, and what did it represent at the level of broad public opinion? Well, broad public opinion, we need to constantly remind ourselves that Mr. Modi's contribution to the Bharatiya Janata Party in 2014 was, we can call him Mr. 10%, because he raised the BJP's traditional vote share of 21% by 10 percentage points. That is what Mr. Modi managed to accomplish in the election of 2014. And we need to understand, how did he do that? What was that 10%? What were those 10 percentage points, made of? And in political terms, what did that signify? What were the assurances or promises on the basis of which he was able to raise the historic vote share of the BJP by 10 percentage points? We need to understand that. But we also need to understand that whatever may have been the motivation of individual voters, it is a fact that the Indian business class as a whole, beginning from 2012, maybe even earlier, but definitely in 2012 and 2013, had made up its mind that we want Narendra Modi as the Prime Minister. And the reason they settled on Mr. Modi is because the government of Manmohan Singh and UPA, for a variety of reasons, had proved ineffective in delivering the kind of things that they wanted. There was confusion on environmental clearances, there was confusion on the fate of various projects. There was a certain squeamishness on the part of the Congress and the UPA when confronted with popular demands from different sectors of the people. Right to information, Narega, these are products of, in a way, mass movements which the government of Manmohan Singh had taken on board. All of this was seen as unnecessary encumbrances, obstacles in the way of the untrammeled growth of business. In addition, the corrupt ways of the Congress and the UPA were also very well known to everybody, including the business class. And there was a certain feeling that you have corruption of two kinds. There is corruption as a whole which favors the business class, as in when you decide that we will not have an auction for 2G. That a scarce resource like 2G will be given away virtually free to big business. That is the kind of corruption that big business likes. And then there is cherry picking. When you go the next stage and say, I'm going to select from among various business groups 5 or 6 guys who will pay me a consideration and get a 2G license in exchange. And it is the latter which managed to annoy many of the business houses who didn't benefit, which finally led to the entire, whether it was spectrum, whether it was coal mining, whether it was iron ore. It was this approach of rent seeking through individual deals that led to the entire process of rent gathering by the big business class getting unraveled. You had in the courts all these cases getting stuck, and I think big business decided very clearly that we don't want any more of this. We want somebody like Modi who will, and it was not just that we want BJP. We want somebody with a proven record in Gujarat of delivering land even if peasants oppose it, of crushing a strike even when workers are protesting. You want a leader who is a no-nonsense, take no prisoners kind of guy. Now the problem is how do you convince the public to go along? It's one thing that you say I'm going to fund them, but we know that elections don't decide everything. Sorry, money doesn't decide everything, right? There's plenty of examples of rich parties with lots of resources losing to a poorer competitor, right? Aam Aadmi Party in Delhi, very good example. BJP had 10, 15, 20 times the resources of the Aam Aadmi Party, but the Aam Aadmi Party won 67 out of 70 seats. So money doesn't swing everything. But what money could do was in that election to work on a certain narrative around the role of Narendra Modi. How do you erase memories of what happened in 2002? And how do you promote a new, so you had this entire mythology around the Gujarat model being pushed through the media, which Mr. Modi very skillfully in his election campaign was able to. It suited him also that people don't talk of 2002, people talk about development. And he also in his own political messaging, you'd be hard pressed to find in the 2014 election campaign more than 1 or 2 speeches where he deviated from his message of Vikas. He knew that my biggest liability going into this election is the suspicion people have that I'm carrying all this communal agenda with me. So his own campaigning, even though at the individual level, at the level of candidates, at the level of Nukkad, Mohalla kind of campaigning, and of course in places like Assam or places like West UP where the communal card could pay very rich dividends. The messaging in that election was all Vikas, no communalism, as far as Modi's own messaging was concerned. Because he knew that people in India young people are impatient, they want Vikas, they want development. So he made all these great promises. He had the media marketing him in 2013, as his great miracle maker. All the progress that Gujarat had made as a developed state, as an industrial state, as a literate state over 50 years was all credit was given to Mr. Modi. And this set of promises, the marketing of a false record, and of course the very obvious public perception of the Congress having failed on the corruption front, very widespread revulsion about the dynastic factor in the Congress party. All of these combine to give those extra 10 percentage points to Narendra Modi. So we need to be very clear that, at least in my mind, the vote that he delivered, those extra votes that he brought to the, I'm not saying that the historic vote share of the BJP of 20-21% is a communal vote, it's not. People were voting for BJP for a variety of reasons. But the 10 percentage points that Mr. Modi brought to the BJP were largely voters who were seduced by the aspirational messaging of the campaign, who were fed up of what they had seen and heard about the Congress and the UPA, and who believed in talk of jobs, talk of vikas, and all the other grandiose promises that were made by him and by the party in that campaign. So there was a very definite and clear-cut strategy of downplaying all the baggage that the critics of the BJP were trying to highlight. So in the campaigning you found very little of that. And playing up the, so we need to be clear on this point, and the BJP also fully understands that. Now, having got elected, the challenge that almost from day one, the challenge before Mr. Modi was, how do you deliver on these promises? How do you satisfy the aspirations that you've raised? How do you, he spoke of 10 crore jobs, he spoke of smart cities, he spoke of end to corruption and black money, he spoke of bringing billions of dollars in black money that was stashed abroad back home. One promise after the other was made, and he knew that sooner or later people are going to begin to expect some kind of delivery on this front. And it seems to me that almost simultaneously with the victory, because the leopard actually did not change its spots. The communal agenda, the so-called cultural nationalist agenda was very much there. All of us who understood the BJP and RSS knew it had not gone anywhere. There were many among us who were seduced by the new propaganda, who saw in Mr. Modi's messaging a signal of a new kind of BJP, a new kind of RSS, a new kind of Modi. There were many commentators, many analysts, many people in the business community who bought all this and who sincerely believed that there was some kind of miraculous transformation that was now going to be underway. And of course the media, almost from the word go, began to suspend all critical faculties and to treat every utterance of Mr. Modi, every policy announcement, you recall the phrase masterstroke, everything was a masterstroke. And you had these kind of phrases being used and promoted. It became very clear that Mr. Modi, who had evaded any kind of questioning, any kind of accountability from the press from 2002 onwards, would continue to remain inaccessible. He believes purely in one-way communication, that too through Twitter and through Man Ki Baat and all of these different devices. And the media, instead of saying, hang on a minute, in a democracy we expect the Prime Minister to be accountable. Even something so, Manmohan Singh was not a leader who gave any interview actually during his tenure. But he held press conferences, not that many, he held 3 large press conferences in Delhi. But every time he travelled abroad, he would hold a press conference on the flight back, where journalists could ask him any question, and they did, and he answered. Or he didn't answer, but the questions were put. Mr. Modi, who loves to travel, was faced with a dilemma. How do you travel when this has been the tradition that prime ministers get questioned by journalists on the way back. He solved this dilemma by traveling and saying, no more journalists on my plane. And cheerleaders said, this is great. This is a slap for the Lutyens media. Lutyens media are all muftkhors. They're all looking for handouts and goodies from the government, not realizing that media houses who sent journalists on those trips spent a lot of money for the hotels and various other things. And had the government wanted to charge for a flight ticket, they would have happily paid for that too. None of them paid attention to the fact that by preventing journalists of saying no more journalists on the PM's visit, you were shutting out one avenue that had traditionally been used for the media to question its leader. So it is very clear from day one that you are now dealing with a leader who is really beyond any kind of questioning from journalists. The one occasion about 6 or 7 months into his tenure that journalists had to be close to him and to ask questions if they wanted to was at a Diwali Milan. But you've seen the photograph of journalists posing with Modi for selfies, and not a single question was asked. Coming back to Modi's dilemma, you made all these promises. What do? Today is August 15th. He made his final Independence Day speech. In his first speech on August 15th, 2014, he said some interesting things. He said there should be a moratorium on all divisive comments, and I don't think he said the word communal speeches, but he said all divisive and hate speeches, there should be a moratorium. He actually put a limit of 10 years. I don't know why he put a limit. If there's going to be a moratorium on hate speech, it should last forever. But he said 10 saal ke liye, so whatever it is, he said 10 saal ke liye, theek hai. And he made some encouraging statements about violence against women and how parents should ask their sons what they're doing, which suggested a new kind of sensitivity for an Indian leader when it came to violence against women. He made some of these interesting statements, but almost immediately after he had announced his 10-year moratorium, his own leaders in Uttar Pradesh, in Bihar, in other parts of the country began openly to flout it. His own members of cabinet began to make one crazy statement after the other. And the response from Modi in the face of all of this was silence. And it baffled many people as to why so soon in his tenure, hardly within 4 or 5 months, the first manifestations of Hindutva excess became very apparent in statements and incidents here and there. And people wondered, he's come with a great agenda, he's come with a great mandate. Not since Rajiv Gandhi's December 1984 victory has any prime minister got this kind of a majority. He was winning state after state, Haryana, Maharashtra, Jharkhand, even Jammu Kashmir. So this old argument that I may have power at the center, but I don't control the states, so thus I cannot do everything that I'm setting out to do. Today that argument is complete rubbish because BJP is in power in more than a dozen states. But it puzzled many people as to how quickly the old agenda resurfaced. The election campaign, which was fought on the basis of Vikas and not communalism, the minute BJP came to power, Vikas was there at the level of rhetoric, still is today. But what was foregrounded was communalism, right from day one. And the only rational explanation for this is that Mr. Modi knew from day one how difficult it would be for him to deliver on any of those promises he made in his election. That 10 percentage points, satisfying those 10 percentage points of people who would be looking for answers by 2019, perhaps even earlier, would be a tall order for him. So how do you deal with the situation of public dissatisfaction on a massive scale, where jobs aren't available, where the smart cities you promised haven't got off the ground, or smart cities where they have got off the ground have tended to be highly elite-driven projects, or projects on a PPP basis, or projects which don't benefit the masses of urban masses in this country. Or Swachh Bharat, which you've announced with great fanfare, and which has led to the physical construction of toilets all over the country, but in the absence of any water supply, in the absence of other kind of infrastructural investments, and we've seen, there's evidence after evidence, audit after audit of essentially this becoming just another scheme which is not being used, not being implemented, and where people aren't benefiting. The plight of sanitation workers remains atrocious. The kind of investments you need in urban sewage systems, etc. None of that is happening in the name of Swachh Bharat, but you have high visibility photo ops. At least now we're not subjected every year to the sight of Mr. Modi and Smriti Irani going through the motion of sweeping streets that have already been swept for them. But the fact is that he knew pretty much from day one that meeting popular expectations on the basis of promises that are made is going to be a tall order. So you have to light a slow fuse. You have to keep your powder dry, as it were, so that people on a daily basis start worrying about other issues, start looking at other topics, start getting embroiled in other controversies. And should the need arise closer to 2019, on the basis of the groundwork that you have laid, it's possible to even escalate the size and scale of these diversions. Today, 4 years later, 4.5 years into the life of this government, it is very clear, we can clearly recognize two essential elements of the Modi strategy, which I also call the Hindutva strategy or the Sangh Parivar strategy. And you recognize, if you switch on the North Korean channels or the Godi media, nationalism and Muslim bashing. So communalism and nationalism are the two big points around which this government is building its political profile. And day in and day out, you have, depending on whatever is the current topic of the day, or depending on whatever the current controversy of the day is, fabricated controversies, fabricated debates and discussions revolving around fake nationalism and revolving around a communal agenda of one kind or the other. Unlike, and here I want to, it's interesting how, you see, we need to understand the role, because people, when you tell them that there is a communal agenda being pursued by the government, people say, but there's been no repeat of 2002. There's been no repeat of 1984. And we need to understand the role that 2002 played for Modi and BJP then and subsequently. In 2002, in Gujarat itself, it's now very clear that the killings which took place in the state when Mr. Modi was Chief Minister helped BJP to stay in power in that state. Mr. Modi was so confident of the fact that the riots would help him that he wanted to advance the date of the 2002 assembly elections. It was only the intervention of Lingdo, who was the chief election commissioner, and the matter went to the Supreme Court, who said, no, the law and order situation is not conducive. But Modi and the BJP fought hard to have an early election. Finally, of course, the elections were held in December that year, which the BJP won comfortably. At the level of Gujarat, the riots worked strongly in BJP's favor, but at the national level in 2004, and there are any number of BJP leaders that, as a journalist, one had spoken to after the shock defeat of Mr. Vajpayee in 2004, when they were trying to understand what the reasons were for this defeat, they were so convinced they were going to win. Many young people in this audience don't remember those terrible days of 2003, 2004 when the entire buzz in the media, people with jobs who are bureau chiefs came and went on the basis of newspapers making predictions about the fact that Vajpayee and Advani would come back. And that didn't happen. One reason is, of course, that the Vajpayee government exaggerated the idea of India shining. They had this phrase, India shining, which annoyed a lot of people, particularly in the countryside. But the other reason, and this played at the level, I think, of even urban middle class, was the idea that, a major riot like Gujarat could happen on Mr. Vajpayee's watch. So BJP leaders were quite clear at the national level in 2004 that what Modi did in Gujarat worked against the party at the national level. And I think their assessment is correct. And I think even today, even among those sections of the middle class that have been communalized, a major riot of the kind that happened in Delhi, which incidentally also helped the Congress in November 84, or what happened in Gujarat in 2000, a major riot of that kind, I think the BJP calculates will actually go against its claims to being a party that deserves to be re-elected. So how do you use communalism as a weapon without engineering or facilitating or tolerating or encouraging a major riot of the kind that happened in Gujarat in 2002? So you have communalism without the pogroms. Communalism, rather than with hitting people with one major incident, you hit them with 1,000 cuts. This is what the logic of your beef agitation, your lynchings, depending on the state, depending on the issue, love jihad, all these kind of bogus issues have been fabricated, have been pushed on people in order to push the poison of communalism into every town, city and district of India, but with just the right amount of calibrated violence. So you kill one person in Alwar and allow his killers to get away with it, and you file charges against Pehlu Khan's family. In Dadri, Akhlaq can be murdered, and you can have a union minister go and attend the funeral of one of the killers, and there's a national flag. When I said that these people have insulted the national flag, this is the kind of activities that they've done with the flag. And yes, there is revulsion at a lot of what this is happening, but all these incidents are used to spread communalism at the local level. So, communalism without major riots is a key part of the agenda, and a lot of the utterances, the same Modi who was careful in 2014 can now deploy Shamshan Ghat, Kabristan, Holi, Eid, and say other kinds of things. In Bihar, for example, in the Bihar elections, when he told an election gathering that there is a plot to give reservation to members of one community which will come out of your quota. A lot of scaremongering vis-a-vis Muslims. You can see the kind of agenda in Assam that is being pursued. And here you have, and this is essentially the way in which through all of these incidents, incessant propaganda to remain in a way to bludgeon people, spread insecure. The more insecure you, the randomness of lynching in some ways makes minorities feel even more insecure across the country than one sustained riot or massacre in Gujarat. Because it becomes clear that Muslims anywhere in the country at any time, no matter what the provocation, could be targeted. It doesn't matter that the data doesn't bear out the level of fear, but the fact is that when you have incidents happening, whether in Gurgaon or Uttar Pradesh or Jharkhand, and you see the reaction of the ruling party, the excuses that are made when you see a union minister like Jayant Sinha garlanding members of a lynch mob, making one wretched excuse after the other when he's confronted with the complete inappropriateness of what he did. Then this dispirites, this sends a shiver down the spine of people across the country. The second key element, if communalism without the pogroms is one element of the Hindutva strategy, the other is nationalism without war. So you have sustained saber rattling using the Pakistan card, and in some attempt to use the China card before Mr. Modi realized that this is not a smart card to play, that this can actually have consequences which you may not be able to control. So it seems now the closer we get to elections, you will see less and less of the China card, and perhaps more and more of the Pakistan card, or the nationalism card may not even involve Pakistanis. You've seen the kind of rabid statements that Mr. Amit Shah has made. It amuses me no end when I cast my mind back to 2002, 2003, 2004, the kind of criticism that the BJP used to level against the president of the Congress party, who they said is only the president of the party, she's not a minister, but files are being sent to her, ministers are meeting her, decisions are being taken. I don't know the truth of the full extent of the charges they leveled, but if I think of a party president who ministers go to meet, who announces government decisions, who makes all kinds of statements about policy matters, the picture that comes to mind is Amit Shah. The Supreme Court pulled up the National Register of Citizens Commissioner, Mr. Hajela, in Assam, for making statements about what the possible outcome of this exercise would be. He said, you are nobody to say who will stay, who will go, etc., because this is the Supreme Court is running this process. But Mr. Amit Shah says that all these 40 lakh people will be thrown out. He says those who are Sharanarthi, and then he goes on to describe. He defines a refugee as a Hindu or a Sikh or a Parsi from Bangladesh or Pakistan. They will be given, so by whom he excludes, he leaves, often you don't have to be explicit in what you say. Most of these politicians, when they use communal rhetoric, leave things unsaid. So he says, Hindus, Sikhs and Buddhists from Pakistan and Bangladesh, they are refugees, they are welcome in India. The others are Ghuspetia, infiltrators, and they will be thrown out. A party president is saying this. He is the Sonia Gandhi of BJP. Where is the outrage? When it comes to television channels, everybody who rightly criticized Sonia for overstepping the boundaries of a party president, there she had the fiction or figment of NAC. Here, our man doesn't even have that. But he happily pronounces on policy matters. When a GST tax rate has to be cut before Gujarat election, it's not the finance ministry who makes an announcement, he does. And you can see in his rhetoric. So nationalism without war, it may well be that the nationalism card that is played in the run-up to 2019 could very well be the wider politics around the National Register of Citizens, where you present, and they are quite confident that this is not an argument that Congress can ever win. And they may be right, because the way they frame it, they will say that you are defending the right of foreigners to be in India. And of course, by foreigner they mean the so-called Ghuspetia. It always amused me how the word infiltrator for an undocumented migrant ever entered our lexicon in the first place. When an Indian, and I met many of them, when a Punjabi Indian or a Tamil Indian leaves India and enters the United States via the Rio Grande in some illegal manner, he or she is an undocumented migrant. They're not infiltrators. They're going there to seek livelihood, just like anybody who enters India from Bangladesh who's coming to work is an undocumented migrant. But you have this language of Ghuspetia, infiltrator. The real infiltrators are, of course, Lashkar-e-Taiba, all these people who come, cross-border terrorists. Use the term for them by all means, but essentially what people like Amit Shah are trying to do is to convey this idea in the mind of people that India is under siege, India is under threat from infiltrators. Now you don't really want to deal with you have no answer. I mean, the fact is that for all the tough talk of the Modi government, the violent incidents in Jammu and Kashmir have not come down. Terrorist groups are as active, if not more active today than they were earlier on the Pakistani side. The number of young men who are getting recruited to join militant groups in Kashmir has gone up. So for that you have no answer really, no solution. From time to time they ratchet up the rhetoric or the ratchet up firing on the line of control, killing on both, leading to the loss of life of innocent civilians on this side of the border and that. So it's much easier for them to play the nationalism card vis-a-vis Bangladesh, vis-a-vis Bangladeshis, and create this whole hysteria about India being overrun. Now you have, as if on cue, people talking about Jain Sinha, the same Jain Sinha who garlanded the lynch guys, saying that we need a national register of citizens in Jharkhand. You had a BJP leader in Delhi saying we should have a similar exercise in Delhi. So it wouldn't surprise me if in the run-up to the election, as a conscious strategy, this is a great way of playing a hyper-nationalist card without the encumbrance of war. And they are quite confident that this card is a risk-free card. There is no danger of a conflict emerging which will escalate that you cannot control. So it's a safer option to beat up on some Bangladeshi migrants than it is China or even Pakistan. And if these are the two key elements of the Hindutva strategy, there are others too, but I wanted to focus on these two because this is where you see the complicity. And I want to come to the media issue, the complicity of the media, or a section of the media, the Godi media, in this whole exercise. Because with certain channels, day in, day out, maybe 5 days in a week, maybe 6, you tune in between 7 and 10 p.m. and you can be sure that you will find some topic of debate which revolves around Muslims. Could be triple talaq, could be halala, could be something that a madrasa has done, could be why do Muslims sing Vande Mataram, or why don't they sing Vande Mataram, or why do Muslims do that, or why do Muslims do that, do something else. And you will have the most backward kind of guests who are brought there in order to argue and shout and fight and create revulsion in the minds of ordinary viewers. The story that I never tire of telling happened this time last year in August. When news broke, you will recall, we are 1 year now from the tragic death of children in Gorakhpur, Yogi Adityanath's constituency, where children died in the BRD medical hospital, and news was breaking even as in one channel they had yet another hopeless debate on whether Uttar Pradesh government's diktat to madrasas to sing Vande Mataram is legal or not legal. And one of the guests said, I think it was the Times Now discussion, told the anchor that look, there are more serious issues to discuss. News is coming of these children dying in Gorakhpur. And the anchor accused this poor person of that you are diverting from the real issue. So here you can see very clearly the government, how the media has internalized the government's agenda. Anything that is embarrassing to the government, anything that shows the government in poor light, anything that shows the BJP in poor light, will not be discussed, will not be the topic of discussion in your evening channels. And things that are, that show the opposition in poor light, or even better still, can be used as a whip against Muslims or NGOs or Christians, depending on the news lineup of that week. That will be the material which some of these channels dwell upon. We saw a counter example recently, what happens when a channel and an anchor deviates from this path. Punya Pusun Vajpayee, whose show incidentally is called Masterstroke, and maybe there is a real masterstroke for him to have chosen that name, and maybe that's why they were irritated with him. But he ran an episode of his show where he debunked a claim that the Prime Minister made during some kind of video conferencing with farmers, where essentially a woman claimed on this, during this video conferencing, how her income had doubled on the basis of a government scheme where she and her colleagues were able to make money out of sitafal pulp. And she said, my income doubled, and Modi said, did the income of your fellow workers also double? And she said, Ji sir. And Modi then beamed and said, this is wonderful, and then he went off on how farmers are so important and how the government is going to double everybody's income. The channel, Punipusun, sent a reporter to the village and very quickly found out that this lady was not telling the full story. They ran an initial story saying that the government was wrong and was misleading the people, and that the woman was coached beforehand. And within a day, the reaction from the government was to debunk this. They put out another story, they sent another channel to go there and get some other interview as to how ABP News had been lying, Punya Pusun Vajpayee had been lying, and that actually the woman's income had doubled. So this channel, undeterred by the Sarkari strategy, sent a reporter to the village for a second time, got more detailed interviews, and this time managed to interview the co-workers of this woman who had said our incomes had doubled. And so embarrassed was the government by this second expose that the signal of this, and we still haven't figured out how this happened, but you've all read about how the signal of Masterstroke, which is a primetime show from 9 to 10, vanished from Tata Sky and all various other direct-to-home services. And at the same time, the anchor was told by the owner, please stop talking about Modi. You can no longer use Modi's name on your show. And he said, how is it possible? Because when we cover any government news, everything that the government announces revolves around Modi. Modi inaugurates a flyover, Modi inaugurates a school, Modi, recently one of the ministries sent around a letter asking every ministry, please tell us over the next 60 days what are all the projects that Modi can inaugurate. So when you have a government of this kind where Modi is everything, the anchor told his boss, look, how can we keep Modi's name out? He says, I don't care, you keep his name out. So they said, fine, we'll keep his name out, but when we show images, Modi is present in every photograph. Every visual of a scheme, you have Modi. And if you're interviewing the so-called beneficiaries of the scheme, and they say that, well, we aren't benefiting, and that the Prime Minister misled us, then are we not to show their bites? And he was told, yes, you are not to show their bites. Anyhow, to cut a long story short, this gentleman had to leave. And another anchor was benched for 2 weeks because he had the temerity to mention in a program that yesterday the Prime Minister said Uttar Pradesh is safe for investors, but today a businessman was murdered in broad daylight. And the owner lost his cool saying, how dare you bring Modi into this? So TV channels or media organizations that, or journalists or anchors who don't function like mouthpieces of the government end up paying a price. And this is very much part of the media management strategy of the government. I have to say, in all fairness to Mr. Modi and his colleagues, that direct pressure is probably less, and it is the owners themselves who are falling over each other to please the government. Now you can say that the reason they are doing this is because they are scared of what might happen, whatever the reason may be. But blame has to lie first and foremost with media proprietors, with media editors who go along with this agenda of blacking out certain news and views, not having discussions on those, and worse, being complicit in the communal and pseudo-nationalist agenda of this government. And I dare say that when history of media is written, the role that we now know Rwandan radio played in the genocide in that country, the same role will be ascribed to some of our leading channels and some of our leading anchors who have played this game of fostering division, fostering communal hatred quite openly. some of the things that anchors now say on live television or the reporters say on live television. One would be embarrassed if somebody were to say it in a private conversation. But these things are telecast and broadcast, and obviously no action is taken because those who have to take action are the ones who are complicit in this agenda. So the use of the media prior to 2014 was to sell this image of Modi as a great economic miracle maker. The use that is being made of the media now is to cover up for the fact that this miracle maker has failed to perform any miracles. So there is no channel other than one or two, no anchor other than one or two that is busy doing an audit of Swachh Bharat or Jan Dhan Yojana or all the other schemes, Ayushman Bharat. You know, it's amazing. Finance Minister Jaitley announced in his budget speech in February that this government is going to come up with a new insurance scheme for poor people in this country. This scheme was meant to be unveiled in August. Today is August 15th, no unveiling of the scheme. Instead, Mr. Modi announces it again. And you have the media reporting it as if it's a new announcement. Forgetting that, hang on a minute, he said it in February. Between February and now, there are more than 150 learned critiques that have been published of what is wrong with Ayushman Bharat and how a country like India, if it is serious about providing health care to its people, cannot rely on a private insurance system. There has to be some form of public investment, some form of public health care to look after the needs of majority, ideally universal health care, but at the very least for those below poverty line. But very little discussion today. Everybody says great announcement. So this, the use of the media now to essentially cover up lack of action by the government and to also further the communal agenda. This is something very new and very sinister. In the past, you know, I remember doing a study a few years ago of the media's role in communalism. The media's role was much more subtle. So sections of the media were always involved in pushing communalism at the margin. But today, to have mainline television channels, mainline anchors, encouraging communal division openly, this is something new and very, very sinister. And I dare say the closer we are going to get to the, you know, there was a television anchor the other day, Aaj Tak channel, who shouted at a guest, I think he was a Congress guy, and the discussion was on the Babri Masjid Ram Janmabhoomi dispute. And she pretty much said, look, you are a Hindu, you tell me, don't you stand for the Ram temple? And he said, look, that's not the question here. She said, I repeat, so she kept badgering him, and finally when he refused to answer, she says, well, I know from your silence what your answer is. So you have anchors now openly taking a stand in favor, you know, this is a legal dispute happening before the Supreme Court, and you have, you know, anchors openly espousing. This is all very, very, very new, very sinister, and it's not accidental. This is, you cannot put this down. You know, I'm sure anchors in the past, reporters in the past had communal views, communal prejudice, but they knew that it's not possible for you to air those. But today, everything is out in the open and encouraged. And I think that this is something which we need to pay very close attention to. Of course, this is what you can see. This is what you can hear, what you can read. What you don't know is what is happening at the subterranean level with social media. The other day in The Wire, we ran a story of a BJP, of an operation being run out of BJP headquarters where they are closely monitoring the individual tweets, stories of reporters, classifying newspapers and articles as pro-BJP, anti-BJP. So on a virtually industrial scale, you have the monitoring of media, identification of who is with us, who is against us, and the bar is very low. And of course, you have whole armies of social media employees whose job it is to seed various pieces of information and disinformation in different platforms on different social media dissemination apps and so on. And here this is something which you cannot, what you see, what you can't see, you can't counter. A lot of what we know about the way in which lynchings are happening across the country is the product of somebody's disinformation campaign. From time to time you may come across a video that is complete nonsense in terms of, it shows a fake photograph, it shows a fake incident. Last year we saw a small video clip of two guys on a road, on a street, fighting with each other. And one guy had a Islamic cap on his head, and he's shown throwing a huge rock on another guy who's lying in the middle of the road, and that guy obviously dies. And this was presented on WhatsApp and on some of the right-wing Hindutva websites as footage of a Muslim killing a Hindu in Bihar. Whereas actually, as alt news discovered, this was footage from Bangladesh of a fight between BNP and Awami League. And who knows, I mean, this is one video that surfaces that some foolish right-wing site brings it out into the open and puts it, so that we can then refute it. But information that circulates on WhatsApp that you may not even see, but it may reach 30, 40,000 people, even if 10% believe that, that's enough poison to, affect relationships on the ground. And the industrial use of disinformation by right-wing political groups, by Hindutva-oriented organizations, with the complete, and we don't know who these people are, beyond a point. One of the wonderful ways in which these organizations operate is that they're not registered bodies. Even you take something like RSS. RSS has all kinds of front organizations. It emerged recently through some RTIs that the RSS itself does not have any formal, apparently there's no bank account in the name of RSS. And somebody then went and somebody registered a trust called RSS to show how he was using this name for the first time. But an unregistered body has all these different front organizations that do all kinds of activities, some declared, some undeclared. And the old, it used to be said, if you read Bhisham Sani's accounts of partition, what great rumor mongers. RSS thrived on the basis of rumors. And what WhatsApp enables you to do is to increase the velocity and circulation and depth and breadth of these rumors. So it has given them a kind of unprecedented reach to spread not just news and information about themselves, but if they so choose, disinformation of all kinds. And we know groups and activists of various kinds using this. It was amusing to see Smriti Irani, when she was INB minister, say that we are going to take action against fake news, we are going to ban journalists who are involved in putting out fake news, and readers should have the right to complain to a committee, and then the press council will cancel their press accreditation and so on. When the reason I'm saying it's laughable is because government ministers themselves regularly purvey and put out fake news. The other day there was some kind of disinformation about Rohit Vemula's mother. And no less a person than Piyush Goyal, who was the finance minister of this country, holds a press conference on the basis of disinformation, purely with the purpose of running down Rohit Vemula and his mother, and not just Rohit Vemula and his mother, but by extension Dalits, Muslims, the entire opposition to the government, all on the basis of disinformation. And there are lots of examples of ministers being involved in this kind of activity. And you can see, in a way, the symbiotic relationship between the networks of circulation. So you have WhatsApp's information that is sent around surreptitiously to millions of people, or thousands, lakhs of people at any rate, and then given added credibility when you have a minister or some senior leader make a statement which kind of endorses that sort of information. And this is not like the way in which Nehru is vilified, for example. Regularly they will edit and re-edit his Wikipedia page to say he was really a Muslim. I don't know what great joy they get from saying Nehru was really a Muslim. I mean, even if he was, so what, right? But all this kind of disinformation about Nehru. And today I saw a tweet that Arun Jaitley put out wishing people for Independence Day, where he had a set of icons where Sardar Patel, who incidentally was the leader who banned RSS, but that's a separate issue. Sardar Patel is in the middle, Gandhiji is to one side, and there is no Nehru anywhere. And so, there is no arena of public discourse that is not open to disinformation, fake news, dissimulation, if it serves the political agenda. And WhatsApp, unfortunately, gives them a reach, gives them depth that they never had earlier, and which gives this agenda of communal polarization that much more strength. Turning to the last point which she raised, and which I know that this has been exercising Biju and everybody at Lamakaan, what's the counter strategy to all of this? Well, at the level of, it's not for me as a journalist to get too worked up about what is happening at the macro level of oppositional politics, but it seems to me as an analyst that at the macro level, the kind of politics that Mr. Modi has been pursuing, which is to weaken every conceivable institution that can serve as a counter to his authority, whether it's parliament, whether it is the judiciary, whether it's the media, whether it's the university system, right? Universities are a great repository of resistance, of discussion, of debate. So you crush the spirit of universities. So there's no institution that could possibly be an arena of opposition or criticism of Mr. Modi that Mr. Modi has not tried to harness or weaken in some way. It's very clear, for example, that this government is out to destroy a university like JNU. And there are other examples. So, Mr. Modi and the BJP's agenda is very clear: weaken institutions, pick off your opposition parties one after the other. So it's only logical that there is a move by opposition parties to try to come together. This may or may not bear fruit, but I think many parties are increasingly recognizing that for them 2019 is a make or break election. Not in a conventional sense that you may be out of power again, but their very survival as leaders and as parties is at stake. And I think this is what is impelling people like Akhilesh Yadav, or people like Mayawati, or even Mamata Banerjee, or Chandrababu Naidu, various other leaders, and the Congress too, to think in terms of some kind of grand coalition, some kind of alliance. It's very hard to say how this will play out. But it is very clear that at that level of macro politics, there is a great deal of action happening, and I would expect between now and May that there may be some developments on that front. But when I speak of the dangers that the narrative that I mentioned poses to this country, I don't think that we should be sanguine or optimistic about this danger being confronted at the level of macro politics. Because if we are here today, and I want everybody to seriously dwell on this, the media is the way it is. I mean, the supine nature of the Indian media was not invented by Narendra Modi. The supine nature of various cronyism in universities, or the failure of other institutions to perform as per their mandate, none of this has been invented by Narendra Modi or the BJP. This is all invented earlier by the Congress, by Indira Gandhi, by people subsequently. The systems have been used, abused, and we are paying the price for decades of abuse of institutional autonomy of one kind or the other, by the undermining of democratic institutions, by failing to recognize people's rights, there are many villains to the story. Not just one, not just two. So to expect that at the level of macro politics, some coalition arrangement, something will magically fall into place, and all the threats that we see today to Indian democracy, to the constitution, to Indian values will all melt away is to live in a fool's paradise. Because even if 2019 brings some kind of a change in terms of government, there's no telling what will happen to all the poison that has already been put into the body politic. So I think that a group like this needs to concern itself with what it can do at its level in terms of public discussions of this kind, in terms of changing public discourse, changing the way in which we look and debate various things. And I very much liked in the concept note that Biju sent me, this idea of a rights-based narrative, rights versus the right. And I've often, been debating with friends that, how do you deal with, for example, the communal politics of BJP? How do you confront it? It seems to me that head-on confrontation is something that they relish. They want that crazy, they want to be crazy and irrational because they know that in this debate they will somehow get their point across. There will be enough people who will be swayed by what they say, or they drag you down to their level. And it seems to me that finding clever ways to avoid falling into this trap is essential. If the big failure of the Modi government, to my mind, has been its performance on the jobs front, has been its failure to, or demonetization, for example, so far they've avoided the idea that there's been any corruption or anything untoward. Now you have the Rafale deal to talk about. It seems to me that discussions on these sorts of topics is something which a government which has not delivered on its promises simply does not want to deal with. They do not want debate on employment in this country. In fake interview after fake interview, Mr. Modi trots out data about Provident Fund enrollment, ESIC enrollment, but the fact on the ground, anybody who has any experience dealing with common people, you know what the employment situation in this country is. It's not a secret from anybody. The fact is that the kind of jobs that need to be created are not being created. And there needs to be more discussion on this. There needs to be more data gathered on this. Jobs that exist. We need to have more reporting of the kind that ABP did, where these women said that, yes, we are getting 200 rupees for our sita pulp, but we had to put in 18,000 rupees and we've not recovered that. We need to have more reporting on the reality of Jan Dhan Yojana, where the government was giving data up till a certain point on how many of those bank accounts are zero balance or 1 rupee accounts. Then 6 months ago they stopped giving that data, and media is not asking where is that data gone. We need to have more reporting of bank managers saying how these accounts that we've created, which Mr. Modi tom-toms all over the world, are a huge burden on the banking system because we're not able to sustain them. We're not able to offer services. We need to have more reporting on Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana. I don't know how many of you people have followed the gas cylinder Yojana, where Mr. Modi claimed to have achieved the target of 5 million new connections for the poor before he had set a target of 2019, and they've announced reaching the target even now. But when we analyzed the data, we found that of the 5 million that are being claimed, at least 2.5 million of those are from earlier pre-existing schemes, including schemes of the government of Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Pondicherry, and so on and so forth. We found that the cost of the cylinder is such that many of the poor people who get a connection are not able to go in for a second or third refill. These stories need to be told. And of course, reporters, this is the job of The Wire, this is the job of media organizations. But I think that all of you in your sphere of work, if you have information, if you have details, and in any case, everybody, all of you are on Facebook, all of you are on Twitter, credible information that you come across should be put into the public domain. I can't tell you how useful public interventions, a lot of the best stories that you see in the media these days emerge from a tip-off by somebody out there who sees something and then we get that information, we investigate, we do due diligence on it and see if it's correct or not. But it seems to me that if we want to counter the strategy of communalism, of this very cynical use of fake nationalism as a means of browbeating the electorate and confusing them and diverting their attention away from the promises that were made, it seems to me that we have to keep reminding people about the status of those promises. We have to keep reminding people about what are the actual successes of this government, what are its failures, and do so not with rhetoric, do so not with adjectives, do so not by running down anybody, but through actual data, statistics, stories of individuals who are affected, so that the reality of what is happening. You see, people are increasingly in their own bubble. India Shining worked against BJP because these ads were shown everywhere, and the farming community as a whole knew that this wasn't true. But I was seeing an ad the other day that the government put out of how 10 million homes have been electrified, and you think about the reality of the electrification scheme is that yes, every village now has an electricity connection, but the definition of an electrified village that the government has, and this is not something Modi made up, even Manmohan Singh used to fudge, even the UF government used to fudge. An electrified village is simply a village where you have one power point and 10 homes. The majority of homes will not have a connection. But this is then presented as if, now, those villages who have recently been electrified know that this is rubbish. So they may feel very angry at this, or maybe they may feel happy that, okay, finally our time has come. But the fact that all of these claims have no basis whatsoever, or have to be taken with huge dollops of salt, this requires reporting, this requires, and it seems to me that it's on these areas that the BJP and others are vulnerable. One can, you can debate love jihad, ghar wapsi, NRC till the cows come home with logic, with facts, and I have no doubt that you will win those arguments. But that's not the way that things play out very, very differently. I mean, I mean, we can debate this in the Q&A, but, for example, Shashi Tharoor's remarks about the BJP is turning India into Hindu Pakistan. Now, at one level, completely unexceptionable remark. This is in fact what their agenda is, and you can find any number of statements. You go back and read Veer Savarkar, where he says, yes, he endorses, I mean, he was among the original proponents of a two-nation theory. Because like Jinnah, he believed Hindus are one country, Muslims are another, and the twain shall not meet, and so on and so forth. So this is very much part of the mindset of Hindu chauvinists or Hindutva politicians. But a statement like what Shashi Tharoor made and the way it was played out in the media, particularly when you have a pliant media that can spin something in a particular way, half the people who heard that statement would say, "Arey, what's wrong? If Pakistan can be Islamic Pakistan, why can't India be Hindu India?" And the other half will say, "Ye to insult kar raha hai India ka. He's insulting Hinduism." So that's not, and that's precisely the way in which the BJP ran this argument. So there was no debate on how BJP is trying to exclude Muslims from public life, and how in every which way there is an attack happening on the rights of people and targeting of minorities and so on. No debate on that. The entire debate gets converted into a fake and phony one about how Tharoor has insulted Hindus, Tharoor has insulted India. So, so even a logical statement of that kind which he made becomes very hard in the polarized media atmosphere to logically have a debate on. And I saw many well-meaning individuals taking part in some of these debates floundering in the face of this kind of illogic. So it seems to me that focusing only or excessively on the communalism, even though that's very much part of their strategy, may not be the wisest way of countering it. And that focusing on the failures to deliver on promises is something which actually, public interest would be served by that, because people have a right to know how these schemes are working. People have a right to know how their promises have been delivered. And the second question that I leave for the audience, again by way of strategy, and this is very difficult because, as I mentioned in that ABP conversation, everything is Modi-centric. So everything the government says is Narendra Modi did this, Narendra Modi did that, Modi government did this, Modi government did that. So while countering it, how do you avoid making your discussion also not Modi-centric? But it seems to me that the more Modi is the locus of discussion and debate, in a way, in a funny sort of way, this also further helps that political agenda, because the entire marketing of the BJP, we saw it in 2014, but in 2019 it will be even more Modi-centric. This idea of a presidential style campaign, why is it that the BJP is so keen? Have you ever asked yourself this, to have simultaneous elections? And the reason is that they have one brand that can be marketed across the country. Whereas if you have a simultaneous West Bengal election with All India election, or a Delhi election with All India election, then, given that a lot of your opposition politics centers around strong state leaders who are trying to come together at the national level to challenge BJP, all of these individual brands get extinguished in their individual state level campaigns if they have to campaign at the same time. But Modi as a national brand is something which the BJP is strongly going to push for, and you will see more and more Modi centrism when it comes to the BJP's own campaigning. Is the effective way to counter that to make all the criticism of the government also Modi centric, or will that end up helping, is a question that I leave for discussion. Certainly in the media, I find often, even in the Wire, we find a lot of articles end up being on Modi, what he said, because that's the position that he occupies in this government. But I think focusing, even we now are looking more and more emphasizing the granular investigation and detailing of how these promises are operating on the ground, because to my mind that is the most vital contribution that journalism can make today, and groups like Lamakaan, and any social media networks that they build, giving specific granular arguments, specific granular details of how things actually work on the ground, and making it clear that the failure of this government is not simply on the communal axis, that is only one part of many, many other issues, and how the communal agenda is part of the smokescreen to divert attention from the failure of those on those other fronts. I think that point has to be made persuasively, and it can only be done on the basis of hard information, and that's where we feel we come in at the Wire. I mean, journalism does not have any, there is no axe to grind, in the sense that if we find that a particular scheme works well, we are very happy to report the pluses and the minuses. Recently we spoke about, we wrote about the Ujjwala Yojana, and what was positive was highlighted, what was negative was highlighted. Similarly with the Swachh Bharat there, or Mr. Modi's solar mission there, whatever is positive needs to be highlighted, but whatever is negative cannot be suppressed, cannot be brushed aside. And it seems to me that the big failure of Indian journalism today is its refusal to deploy basic investigative tools to understand what is the reality of the Modi Sarkar, and compounded by a major section of the media crossing over and actually becoming complicit in the communal agenda of the party. We at the Wire are essentially driven by the idea that independent journalism in the public interest is sorely needed at this time for Indian democracy, for protecting the kind of constitutional values that we all hold dear, and we rely very much on public support. So I do hope that after this lecture is over and you've gone back home and you discuss, that you will visit and read the site and think carefully about also extending your support for the Wire or for other media initiatives that you find gives you the sort of news that you can trust. But unless there is a relationship between reader and media of the kind that we are trying to nurture, I think the existing level of Indian journalism is only going to make matters worse it's going to, and I think between now and 2019, as the stakes rise, as the chips fall, you will find even more objectionable things emerging on the media front. So thank you very much. I'll stop there, and I'll be happy to take questions from you and from the audience. Thank you.
I am sure many of us do, and so I'll raise some of the concerns that I thought of while you were speaking, and then we'll open it out for everyone to ask questions. Anyway, today morning, at least in University of Hyderabad, lot of the students woke up to slogans by ABVP saying Vande Mataram kehna hoga, nahi to jana hoga, and all those things that they usually say. So there is no denying that there is a certain kind of impunity that a lot of people have gotten because of BJP being in power. But like you said, like taking off from what you were speaking, beyond this Modi Shah or beyond this this image of the villain that Modi is, actually what the RSS and BJP is able to mobilize lies already in society in the way in which ruling caste and ruling class functions. So like I want to ask about like one of the important concerns to us seems that about communalism and Hindutva. So one thing that comes to my mind is like even when we speak about lynchings, for example, if you look at what happened in Una or what is happening in many other places, mostly in our public discourse we tend to use the word mob lynching, but actually it is not a mob. It is a well-organized, strategized event that takes place, as in case of caste atrocities when villagers or a certain caste group decides to inflict violence upon a certain community or a certain family from a community. So these are not random or these are not faceless mobs that are operating. And there is something about social relations that exist in a society that are acting out and also getting successfully strengthened and mobilized by Sangh Parivar and BJP. So I want to know how, for example, even in the question of communalism, if we look at probably after 2002, the thing that really shook was the Muzaffarnagar riots. And so even in the case of Muzaffarnagar riots, the thing was about Hindu versus Muslim, but actually at a closer look, it also came out that it was the Jats who rioted or who instigated communal violence upon the Muslims. In case of Una, again it is clear that it is a dominant caste which is inflicting violence upon Dalits, and it is not a faceless mob. In case of, say, Perumal Murugan's issue, again, what media was saying that it is the right-wing forces but it was the Gounder caste which became the faceless right-wing Hindu mob. So, where does the question of caste feature in our understanding of communalism? Because Hindu, as also Muslim, is not a homogeneous, is not a uncomplicated, neat category. And we can see now with the question of Marathas, Kapu and Jats, these landed castes mobilizing in a certain way while even though they may be against BJP in certain sense in some places, they are what can be understood as a right-wing agenda. And so how should people actually situate the question of caste in communalism so that it becomes more complicated than just this thing of Hindu-Muslim that even BJP wants to do?
So I think that I'll make 2 points in response. The first is that these mobs that we see, right, whether it's, let's look at Dadri. So in the case of Dadri, like in virtually all of these mobs, once you go beyond the initial reporting of the incident, right, and you see, okay, who are the fellows named as accused, who are the guys who end up getting arrested because somebody has identified somebody. We know that in the case of the Jharkhand lynching, which Jayant Sinha Garland did, and in the case of Dadri, and in the case of the recent one, Akbar, killing of Akbar Khan, so-called Akbar, the Aadhaar card has his name wrong, but Akbar's killing, we know the involvement of individuals connected to Sangh Parivar. And as I said, Sangh Parivar is an amorphous body. They have all kinds of front organizations. But at the local level, who they are, what their affiliations are known to everybody. And even in cases where, so we know that in the case of Rakbar, it was not a spontaneous mob that was formed. We know that they were mobilized, they were waiting awaiting him coming back with his cattle, and they pounced on him. In other instances, there may be some truth in the spontaneity of the incident. But when you scratch deep enough, you find involvement of somebody or the other connected to a front organization of Sangh Parivar. But even if you don't find that, and this brings me now to the caste question that you've raised, that whoever the dramatist person they are, you can be absolutely certain that if there is retrogression, if there is reactionary violence happening of this kind, if there is killing of innocent people, if there is targeting of weaker sections, whether it's women, whether it's Dalits, whether it's Muslims, whether it's OBCs in certain instances, invariably the right wing appropriates, and they will find support in the right wing. So it's very clear to me that part of the agenda of the Hindutva groups is to build on existing, is to fashion out of existing local level tensions, animosities, rivalries and problems, a pan-Indian, pan-Hindu kind of a consciousness which can be deployed at the national level. So they will latch on to a Perumal Murugan, so they will be the big defenders of the ban, even though they are not necessarily directly involved on the ground in the action against Perumal Murugan. But on national TV, this will be presented as somebody who has insulted Hindu gods. So what is wrong if he is banned from writing? So their ability to pick up on these conflicts and invariably land on the side of upper caste, oppression, anti-women, anti-minority politics, this gives you a clue as to what the connection between caste and communalism is. So yes, there are, in the past we have seen how caste politics has also undermined and undercut communal agenda, right? The whole Mandal ka Mandal in the post-VP Singh days, how there was a whole theory that in Uttar Pradesh, for example, the politics of BSP and SP is very good because it is fracturing, it is coming in the way of the BJP fashioning a pan-Hindu identity. It now turns out that is not such a wise way of looking at it either, right? Because the kind of solidarities or identities that BSP or SP created were not socially transformative and proved to be very fragile. And we could see in not just 2014, but in the last Uttar Pradesh election, how huge sections of OBCs, a significant section of Dalits, BJP was able to mobilize. So, I think that I think you're right to complicate the communalism question by looking at the caste factor, but I think that the BJP is one step ahead always. That they have already figured out how to use and how to deploy caste conflict for the wider agenda. But whenever there is a conflict, upper versus lower, you can be almost certain that they will be on the side of traditional oppression and look for ways in which this can be deployed at the national level. So even if you look at, for example, how do you take a Bhima Koregaon, post-Bhima Koregaon violence, right? So the tool that they used to convert that to their advantage, right, was to play the Maoist card. So to say finally that, this is not a Dalit versus upper caste issue. This is not there's no caste here. This is straightforward a conspiracy of Maoists. So you then play Maoist the card to tell Dalits that even though we have acted against you, and your guys are all arrested and the other fellows who killed you are not arrested, but actually you're all victims of a Maoist conspiracy. So this is the kind of, they're very, very skilled at playing this kind of politics.
I think, the fact that BJP RSS has from the beginning been a step forward in mobilizing in separate castes for political gains. But what I was also trying to add to what you have just said, that about this division between Hindutva and Brahmanism. So Brahmanism, casteism, as it exists in society as a whole, as it exists in across beyond these political parties, beyond Congress, BJP, SP, or so whenever we talk about BJP, RSS, somewhere, like you were saying, that we need to find ways of not falling into the trap of the rhetoric that they said. So one of the things probably is also, in some sense, to question Brahmanism and casteism that exist in our institutions already, and not just in BJP's clear-cut agenda of destroying higher education universities. Sure, that does happen, but we have also seen in the case of HU, for example, how a Kamma lobby like Venkaiah Naidu being in BJP and Kamma lobby existing in the university and at state level politics works out to. So our challenge need not just get limited to the aura of Modi and Shah, but also to the existing structures.
In fact, if I can widen that slightly and say that, for example, we know how the BJP is playing Muslim women against Muslims in general, right? Or using Muslim women as the cutting edge of its new communal campaign. Now, to my mind, there's no reason for a progressive to shy away from being vocal on the problems with instant triple talaq or other kinds of inequities. And perhaps if one is honest, one would say that for too long, one has shied away from strong discussions on this, for fear that this will somehow play into BJP's hands. In my view, a politics which does not, any opposition politics which shies away from taking a stand in favor of the oppressed, taking a stand in favor of justice, will not succeed. So we cannot cherry pick and say that, okay, for me, the BJP's communalism is the main issue, so I'm going to ignore what is happening in HCU, or I'm going to say, I'm going to stand with the so-called Muslim Personal Law Board with their retrogressive positions on XYZ topics. We have to be very clear that in fact, the ideal opposition politics is one that says we will not allow somebody who is insincere to appropriate this. The BJP tried, for example, to, if you look at the valorization of, BJP is very consciously from 2014 onwards tried to appropriate Ambedkar. But you look at Bhima Koregaon, look at the way they've treated Chandrasekhar Azad Ravan. Like, here's a young Dalit activist who they've slapped, the court said, release him, you have no case. They've slapped NSA on the guy. You look at the way in which they've targeted various Dalit activists saying that they are Maoist. So it's very clear that, so these things have to be highlighted, And I think that, whether it's caste oppression, gender oppression, anything of this kind, people on the opposition should not shy away from. And similarly, opposition figures, like if, this applies to, certainly it applies to us as journalists. If Samajwadi Party leadership or Lalu Prasad or Mamta takes a stand against, Mamta's social media policy, or, she is quite intolerant of cases have been filed against people for cartoons in West Bengal. And we need to be very clear that that's as much an attack on media freedom as anything that a BJP ruled state may do. It's important that there be a certain consistency.
I would like to basically get your opinion on the issue around judiciary. We saw that in the last phase of the previous UPA government, there was a lot of judicial activism, which unfortunately we are not seeing currently in the present dispensation. So that's one. And what's your take on the current controversy that is happening around the judicial collegium system, and what's your view on that?
Good evening. Can you comment on the functioning of RTI? Especially, I think a lot of secrecy is being invoked, and then in the name of secrecy provision in the RTA, information is not coming out. Is that one of the reasons why we are not able to find out so many issues of corruption?
My question might be naive, but still this question has been disturbing me for the last 4 years, so I'd like to ask a couple of questions. First, as you rightly said, social media, though it creates quite a lot of rumors, but especially in the case of Tamil Nadu, I feel it creates a lot of positive vibe in the state. For example, in the recent days, social media has stripped off the dubious nature of the right wing and their manipulative realities and created a collective dissent across the state. So, I mean, that has been showcased in the recent election in R.K. Nagar in Tamil Nadu, where BJP got less than the nota. So that is, the social media has taken played a vital role in discarding the dubious nature of this. So, yes, that is one. And then in this context, what are the actions or strategies which has been taken by the leftists or the regional parties or medias, big medias? I feel their role as being less in, that is my first question. And second question is, in the last 5 years, the growth of RSS and then other regional parties or leftists, I feel there isn't much growth. Whereas in RSS, there has been a huge rise in their propaganda of their ideology, but whereas the other parties which fights for the rights of the people, which has been suppressed. So, for example, in Tamil Nadu, Tirumurugan Gandhi, who've been fighting for the rights of the yes.
In that, according to the question he asked for, RTIs are not being answered. But I want to look at the other information flow of citizens' data flowing back to the government, and how the BJP wants to use all the beneficiaries' data in the new upcoming elections, how to do a targeted approach, the targeted campaign with all the 20 crore beneficiary data that they have. So my question is on information warfare that the BJP exactly is doing through various platforms, on restricting information to us while it collects all of our information to polarize us, or the ways in which we can't understand, as you mentioned. So how do you see these dynamics flow in 2019?
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think the judiciary is any less activist today or more activist. I think that in the past also some judges were so-called activists, others were not. I don't see too much of a shift. In fact, there have been some very good judgments in the last year or two, and we're expecting a few more. I think the whole country is waiting for the 377 judgment, which I'm hoping will be a good one. The collegium system, you see, one of the first things that Mr. Modi tried to do was to change the way judges are selected. And this attempt was done for a reason. As I said, every institution was to be somehow emasculated or dominated, or ensure that they don't serve as a check and balance. And I think influencing the way judges are selected is a very important part of that political agenda. In the past, governments have tried to interfere this way or that way, but the NJAC was one of the most systematic attempts made to give the government a very clear-cut say that they didn't have in the past. It failed because the judiciary realized what this was. This is not to say that the collegium system is not is perfect. It isn't. It definitely has to change, because the idea of judges selecting each other, and we've seen the quality of many selections, leaves much to be desired. So we do need a change, in my view. It's just that the baggage that the current government carries makes it virtually impossible for any of its proposals to be treated with, everybody will be a bit suspicious about the motives. So I think that this is the conversation which, I think unfortunately the fact that the BJP attempted the NJAC has postponed actual reform by another 10 years. The question that you asked about RTI, yeah, this is a very serious problem. It's virtually, RTI activists say that it's now become routine that your first question is, the first response you get is denied. So you are forced to go on appeal for something that 4 years ago or 5 years ago you would have got at your very first request. And so they've just raised the obstacles, made it more and more difficult. a lot of information is being denied on totally spurious grounds. For example, a lot of the demonetization queries. RBI saying that if we give this information, somebody's life will be at risk. And all kinds of ridiculous reasons were given as to why this information cannot be parted with. So there is a sense in which this government has put a spanner in the RTI works. They've delayed appointments. We know that the RTI, that the CIC is woefully understaffed at the top level. And all of this has served to basically weaken what was a very, very empowering mechanism for ordinary citizens, for the media, for NGOs and anybody who was working for people's interests. So I think that's a very serious problem. The issue of, you see, you may have misunderstood me. I'm not saying that social media is bad. I'm saying the use that the Hindutva groups have made of social media adds more punch to their divisive message. So they have made very skillful use of what is an empowering tool, and just as it empowers them, it empowers you. It empowers everybody here. So actually, if I gave the impression that I'm against social media, I want to, I want to emphasize that I'm very much, the Wire has the kind of reach it does because social media is a leveler of the playing field. So our stories have very, very wide circulation because of Twitter, Facebook, and so on and so forth, and WhatsApp. But these things have to be used responsibly, and unfortunately, lots of people use it very irresponsibly. I'm glad to hear that in Tamil Nadu or other places, people have made positive use to push for positive change of one kind or the other. I think that this is perhaps an area that we don't fully understand yet. I think the right wing understands it better than we do as to how you use WhatsApp. But I think that using WhatsApp for pro-people, progressive initiatives, it should be possible. And I think that organizations like Lamakaan or others who are here should actually actively take this up. We certainly, use it a lot and in a positive way. It is true that yes, RSS, why RSS? Even Yogi Adityanath's group of goons in Uttar Pradesh, the Yuva Vahini, also saw a huge increase in enrollment after he became CM. So, it's in the nature of any society that power attracts all kinds of people, and because there is not just the prestige of being associated with the government, but perhaps some people see rent-seeking opportunities, money-making opportunities, or simply the visibility and propaganda that the RSS has got is drawing people to it. It's unprecedented that I think 2 years in a row, Mohan Bhagwat's speech, his Vijay Dashmi speech, was shown on Doordarshan. Now, to my mind, who is Mohan Bhagwat? I mean, Mohan Bhagwat is the leader of a religious outfit. He's no different from Owaisi or the Shahi Imam. Why should his speech be shown on Doordarshan and not, the head of Jamiyat Ulema-e-Hind or some kind of organization? So it's clear that the state has bent rules to promote RSS and its front organizations. And there are lots of ways in which basically, its guys have been put on. If you look at the people who are on various public sector boards, various appointments, people who have been made professors, people who have been made vice chancellors, there is a sense in which their people are being promoted. So it's become suddenly a very attractive organization. And they've even changed their dress. So if you were earlier a bit reluctant to go out in a half pant or knicker, now you have the option of wearing a full pant and looking less ridiculous. So for all these reasons, they may, it doesn't surprise me that they are growing. But yes, it should be a matter of concern if other parties are not, they should all introspect. If communist parties are not growing, they should introspect, because you have example of AAP, which came from nowhere and became a major presence, not just in Delhi, but Punjab. It's a different matter that they have all kinds of issues that they have to solve. But I think people are looking for change, people are looking for credible alternatives, and it's really up to people like yourself to take the initiative and actually be out there and be a catalyst for that kind of change. Because if you don't fill that space, there's any number of reactionary kind of people who are, because they see politics as a conduit for accumulation of wealth and power. So I would say that, you've put your finger on the right kind of problem. And what was the question from here? Yeah, no, it's a very good question, because you're right. I mean, we know less and less about the government. They know a lot more about us. And I think that the hidden weapon of the BJP in the coming campaign will precisely be this use of data. We know that, and in fact, there was a curious, if you followed the Cambridge Analytica controversy, data can be used and misused. So it seems as if some mysterious client booked Cambridge Analytica to mislead Congress party. And this, they were not sure who this person is, but they said some NRI businessman engaged us, and he said Congress is not to find out, I'm the one who sent you. So, data is definitely the weapon of choice in the coming election. But I think again, data probably matters at the margin. I would say that one should not be despondent at the fact that BJP will have huge amount of data at its control. First of all, others can also get as much data as they can, but I think no amount of data manipulation or data-driven messaging can alter facts on the ground. And it's important that we keep the discussion centered on facts on the ground. But yes, this is a big weapon in the armory of the Hindutva groups.
Yeah, like I'll be giving an analogy of in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, both Brutus and Mark Antony get an opportunity to speak to a gullible public, which we know that the people of India in general are gullible. So what kind of Mark Antony uses rhetorics to convey his message to the public. What kind of language game is good journalism lacking? As you mentioned, alternative news, alt news, that is using a different kind of method, sarcasm, to convey its message. So is it ethical to use ki tedi ungli se ghee nikalna? Is it ethical for newspapers like The Wire to go to that path to gain what they are trying to get?
My question is that isn't there a difference between getting our feet ground on the truth and between marketing that truth? The truth and marketing of truth are two different things. And marketing of truth requires a certain kind of skill which you have mentioned. Skill, cleverness, propaganda, tactics, strategy. And I think that is where there's a big hole, a vacuum. So these guys are far more clever, and I think somewhere the ones who are really fighting for the human rights have not been able to pick up the skills, even from their adversary.
Thank you for your enlightening lecture. These days, most of the mainstream media is towing the line of the ruling party, excepting one or two. And only the portals like The Wire, Quint, maybe Alt News, Janta, only a few are there, which are trying to spread the truth among the people. But when the elections will be close, it will be very easy for the ruling party to suppress those couple of channels and block these websites and some Facebook IDs which are trying to share the truth with the people. So how are we going to counter the ruling party's narrative when it will be the critical moment before the elections?
So my doubt is, today is there a need of clearing the confusion in the lower level cadres of voters? What is the difference between Hinduism and Hindutva? Because I doubt how many people today understand the statement I make. I am a Hindu, I practice Hinduism, and I'm against Hindutva. Because today people are in a confusion that BJP is protecting Hinduism. No, it is not protecting Hinduism. It is inculcating something which is dangerous, which is called Hindutva, by eliminating all other religions in this country. So do you think there is a need to clear this confusion among the cadres of voters?
Your talk reminded me of a recent interview on Stephen Colbert's show of the CNN chief White House correspondent. And like Donald Trump, Modi also doesn't engage with media, like you've already said. And what Jim Acosta said was that he now engages with people who support him. So to break the impasse, I mean, Modi derives power from the people who are supporting him. So to break the impasse, isn't it imperative for journalists who want a healthier society to go engage with those kind of people also?
I'll answer that. Okay, so these two questions, your question and ma'am, your question, which had to do with the method of writing, tactics. They're similar, so I'll deal with both of them together. I don't see journalism is a craft. It has certain rules, and those rules are very simple. You have to have your facts correct. There has to be objectivity while reporting. You should, if you are doing a story, a news story, which is critical of somebody, that person should have the right to give her or his point of view, and their version. You should listen to what their version is. Beyond this, these fundamental rules are unchanging. And I would add a fourth one, which is that we should separate editorializing from reporting. So if you're reporting something, report it. If you're giving your opinion, give your opinion, but give it separately. Don't mix the two, although sometimes it's difficult to separate, but one should try to separate the two. Sadly, what we see on television today is a complete mishmash of editorializing and reporting. You see all the precepts of journalism thrown out of the window, and instead, essentially a lot of either unverified news or biased news being put out there. So I would say the answer to what these channels are doing is to stand for actual journalism. And if we stick to the trade craft, I think that this empowers us enough to be able to communicate effectively to people. It's a different matter that, yeah, writing style has to be effective. One should make use of different kinds of storytelling techniques. For example, digital media allows you to have video, allows you to use audio, interactive graphics. So all of these we need to understand how effectively to use them so that you can get your point across to a reader. And, you know, yes, language has to be effective. And yes, you're absolutely right that when it comes to the rhetoric of engagement, I would say irrational politics, whether of right or left, tends to be more effective than those who are trying to be rational. So they have that advantage. But I would say that it's a momentary advantage. It's an immediate advantage that does not necessarily have lasting effect. So I would say that, yeah, I mean, those who want to counter Hindutva need to hone their skills of writing and speaking. But the answer can't be to use your tedi ungli se ghee nikalne wali baat. So I would say that, you know, one should not violate the rules of journalism in pursuit of like in England, people went to extremes of hacking into people's voicemail and so on and so forth. All that one should not do, quite frankly. You know, sting operations. You know, we have support. You know, when Cobra Post did its sting operation or paid news, we carried that story, and in a way we basically you know, reported what they had done, because we thought there is something positive that came out of it. You know, where there's compelling public interest, you can do some of these tactics, but I would say, you know, certainly draw the line at breaking the law, which is what some British papers have ended up doing. So I would say the tradecraft is enough to help us stand. On your question, sir, you know, I don't foresee a problem of election coming closer and channels being blocked and so on and so forth. It's possible that some owners will panic and you know, sack anchors or say ki bhai ye cover mat karo, etc., as in the case of ABP News. But we don't foresee that problem. So the simple reason that we don't have any owners, or rather we are ourselves the owners. And we consciously chose to structure the wire as a not-for-profit. So there's no investor who is going to pick up the phone and say, "Yaar, ye tum kya story chala rahe ho? Modi gussa hai." You know, it doesn't matter. And you know, and it's, you know, when we were doing one of our stories on the government, and it was done by a reporter who was formerly with the Economic Times, and there's a very senior minister who confided to a friend of the reporter that if she had been doing, she's now freelance, that if she had, Rohini Singh, if she had been doing the story in ET, he says, I could have got the story stopped. But when I heard it's in the wire, I said, forget it. Ye to chapega hi chapega, baad mein dekhna padega. So yes, the pressure will come in the form of financial. So we know for a fact that some of the people who've donated money to us, I mean, not small amounts, some large donors, they have been leaned upon, they've been bullied, etc. So our answer to that is fine. If you're a large donor, we'll do without you. But how the government cannot stop thousands of small donors. And so we've launched a campaign in the last 2 weeks, asking people to donate minimum, to commit to 200 rupees a month. If we have 10,000, 20,000 such people who are giving as little as 200 a month, so who can stop us? That's enough money for us to publish. And it becomes impossible for any government to try to block or use finances as a way of suppressing. And similarly, Quint, Raghav Bell runs Quint, and he is an independent-minded person. He has his own resources. I don't think it's going to be that easy to shut him down or to shut any of the others who are alt news. Similarly, Pratik, he is also based on crowdsourcing. So, this is in the old days of print only. Yes, government could seize your printing press or do all kinds of things, but it is much harder. So I can give you my assurance here that we will be alive and kicking, no matter what whatever pressure comes our way, because it's not so easy to, to close down. And this is the beauty of the internet, that kis ko aap regulate karoge, like websites they're hosted in some other part of the world, and you can't block internet access to all Indians. So even if, we recently have a problem in Bangladesh, incidentally. There's a lot of repression happening of media. And a famous photographer, Shahidul Alam, has been arrested, and we've been writing a lot about him. So somebody mailed us from Dhaka to say the wire has been blocked in Dhaka, in Bangladesh. The wire.in. But people have found ways of getting around. People are posting our stories on Facebook. So everybody is able to access it. So, I'm not too worried about this part. Yeah, good question. Look, I think that I also often meet people there was once an Ola driver in Delhi who we were talking about, politics, and he said, "हाँ, मोदी ने कुछ नहीं किया, लेकिन एक काम अच्छा कर रहा है." मैंने कहा, "क्या है?" He says, "वो मुसलमानों को अपनी जगह दिखा रहा है." He's showing Muslims their place. So I said, "Well, what is it to you? Like, what place do you want them to be shown, and why do you feel, nahi, hum Hindu hain?" मैंने कहा, "But as a Hindu, what is it you want to do as a Hindu that you are not able to do?" And so he said, "नहीं, उनके 4 बीबियां होती है." मैंने कहा, "Do you want?" I said, first of all, in the census of India, this is a fact, by the way, there are more polygamous Hindus than they are polygamous Muslims. So I said, so I gave him that data. He said, "अच्छा, मुझे पता नहीं था." Then he said, "नहीं, but 4 बीबियां हैं तो आबादी बढ़ेगी." I said, "Look, be sensible. If one man has 4 wives, chances are that the number of children who are going to come from those 4 wives will be less than if the 4 wives had their own husbands." So I said, so he said, "हाँ." He said, "हाँ." So he said, "हाँ, ये भी मैंने सोचा नहीं, ये भी बात सही है आपकी." So yeah, I think at that level these kind of arguments work. I mean, I'd be wary of, so at the end of the day, arguing Hindu versus Hindutva, to my mind, is tough, because the Supreme Court went and said Hindutva and Hinduism is the same thing, and whenever you confront a BJP fellow, the Supreme Court has said, "Who are you?" Right? So, in my view, we don't even need to go down that path. The argument to make is that, look, as a Hindu, what is it that you lack? Like what is it that you want to do that you can't do? And if he says, "Mujhe naukri nahi mil rahi," are you not getting a job because of a Muslim? You're not getting a job because Modi hasn't given you the job, right? So I'm saying it's very easy to, if somebody, says as a Hindu, I feel, I'm not getting my due. It's very easy to debunk that without going into the Hindu versus Hindutva. Although that is also an argument to have, that Hindutva guys actually don't understand Hinduism, but it's maybe a second order argument.
Thank you so much for your talk. And just want to, before I ask my question, just say thank you so much for starting The Wire. A lot of writers like myself have gotten a good platform to showcase their bylines. My question is about the narratives that you talked about. For instance, you said a lot of narrative building went on prior to 2014 and after. In the diaspora, that narrative has really been amplified as well. And people here, whether it's the IT cell or Modi supporters, they've been amplifying that. Whatever's, the diaspora's narrative of Modi here. I just want to ask, how effective has The Wire been in, countering the diaspora as well? A friend of mine did a story on the Hindu Swayam Sevak Sangh and their activity against caste legislation. I almost did an expose on the Hindu American Foundation, but I didn't want to destroy whatever good relationship I had with them, and my recorder wasn't on at that time, so that's why. So I just want to ask, how effective have you been against the diaspora narrative building?
So we'll have only 4 more questions and then we'll wrap up because there is a forecast.
I have a question and a request. First, the question. The question is, has Wire done any analysis on the demographics of the new WhatsApp users, particularly after the advent of Jio? And what is the likely impact on this Hindutva narrative? I think that's a very significant thing, and I'm not getting enough in the media about this. The second is a request. I just got some intelligence about you. सुना है कि आप बहुत अच्छी उर्दू बोलते हैं, तो गुजारिश है कि हम हैदराबादियों के लिए 2-4 लफ्ज पेश करें.
Hi, Siddharth. You were talking about how the left in India has, hasn't been picking up on the narrative of fighting against the regime and the bickering about whether it's fascism or authoritarian dictatorship. I want to understand 3 fundamental questions in terms of looking at it through a political economy prism, right? Because you haven't spoken about it. Caste was discussed, communalism was discussed. So I want to understand how it is easy to convince people to streamline all their personal interests in the interest of the nation, number 1. Number 2, how can you tell them that they have to believe in this monolith called the nation, despite the fact that they're hungry? And also, why should they thump their chest when Tata Motors goes and buys Jaguar Land Rover, despite the fact that he's sleeping on the footpath? Hitler has done this in terms of convincing people that they have to go, and it's happening again. So,
sir, we all know that not more than 35 to 40% of the people in any constituency votes for BJP. So wouldn't it be the perfect time to ask for preferential voting or single transferable vote, as most of the democratic countries have ditched this first past the post? This is the only way I see to stop the present dispensation. Thank you.
Sir, my name is Songja. I have 2 questions. One is related to the media. If you look at the present circumstances, Network 18 or various corporate media houses has presence across the states in regional languages. So isn't it like the government, the present government, or the corporates wanted to foray into this market because this is the place where it has more outreach than English media from Delhi or the so-called the national media that is centered around Delhi? And the second part is related to the narrative from the opposition forces. Don't you think that it's high time that after 4 years, election after election, the BJP government, the BJP is coming to power in most of the states? So isn't it the situation is that the opposition forces could not come out with an argument that what the people at the ground realities want, selling that with the advance of globalization and liberalization, people now aspire more even if you go to the villages, they talk about it, how digital transaction has, digital revolution has come to a village. Now I can book a ticket, train ticket from by sitting at home. So isn't it high time that the opposition come out with a counter narrative, from all those,
All good questions, and I forgot to answer one about engaging with BJP, with Modi supporters. So, I don't know the interview that you see. There's 2 issues here. Media needs to be able to interact with the Prime Minister and his ministers in order to put questions to him and demand accountability. For example, I've been dying to ask Modi something simple. What I mentioned, this moratorium on hate speech. Why did you say 10 years? आप हमेशा के लिए बोल देते. Or lots of other questions. There's never been a chance, right? There is no substitute for. So many, and in fact, many channels, NDTV, for example, BJP spokespersons have officially been boycotting NDTV. So in order to get some BJP point of view, they get an RSS, some Rakesh Sinha, some professor, there's some Jan Ki Baat guy, Bhandari, who says he's independent but everybody knows he's BJP. So there's this kind of fiction. Media, ultimately, if you want to have diversity of debate, then you can use all these tactics. And as a media organization, one should, like when we write, we are not writing for the converted, in the sense that we are writing for everybody, and we have moderated comments, and the reason we moderate those comments on the wire is because people can be very abusive, or people can advocate murder and genocide, and we don't allow that. But so we actually initially we were just deleting. If somebody said, Modi's great, Jan Dhan Yojana is fantastic, etc. But I don't think Muslims are Indians. In the past, we would just delete that comment. Now we spend time, we delete that line about Muslims, and if he wants to praise Jan Dhan Yojana, theek hai, karo. If he's got some data. So we are very keen to have that conversation as long as it's rational. And there should not be any hate or misogyny or, which unfortunately a lot of these people fall back on. On the question of sorry, I've forgotten now. This is the problem. Huh? Yeah, okay, your question, right? Yeah, so there was that one, and then there was the one on language? Vernacular, the media and vernacular languages, right? And there was and the first past the post, right? Okay. So, what is happening in English media is actually happening across the board. So the same processes and tendencies are visible, plus or minus in most media territories. And I would say that, but of course, depending on local conditions. So in Tamil Nadu, for example, when I was editor of Hindu, I noticed that Jayalalitha was somebody, she was CM when I was editor of the Hindu. Jayalalitha and her government was treated with kid gloves by the entire media fraternity because she would have this tendency of slapping defamation cases. Like if you were critical of anything that she did, fatak, there would be a criminal defamation case filed. I left Chennai with 3 filed by Jayalalitha, and I've been reliably informed that even though Madam is gone, those cases still exist against me. And regional media has to contend not just with the national politics, but also with regional leaders who can be quite dictatorial and quite intolerant. On this issue of regional parties, BJP being effective, you're right. I mean, BJP has in many states sold itself as the party that will manage the economy better. But after some time, people realize, right? So if you have an app that you can book a train ticket on, this is the product of an IT revolution that has been 20 years in the making. So we don't know, I mean, we know as an analyst that what it has taken for IRCTC to go from the initial stages to now a situation where you can do this. People may think that this is the product of Modi Sarkar, but at the end of the day, I think they are swayed only to a certain extent by this sort of stuff. My sense is that in state after state, what has proved decisive for, you have a lot of regional factors which matter, and it wouldn't surprise me, say, in a state like Rajasthan, where BJP may lose in the elections coming up, despite the fact that people can book train tickets and use their phone and all this kind of thing, because the quality of governance simply hasn't kept pace. I would say there's a lot more, but you're right. I mean, essentially, there's only so much of blame that you can attach to the BJP. The fact is that, as I said in my talk, that the BJP is a product of the collective failure of all of these parties, and we need to be brutally frank about it. That the kind of government that Congress has given in state after state at the center is woefully inadequate. I mean, if today Modi is talking of Ayushman Bharat and we are criticizing him, but we should also say Congress ruled for 50 years and they did nothing at all beyond the initial burst in the 50s and 60s to create the basics of public health care in this country. So I think that those are conversations that one must have. आपका सवाल था जियो पे, दरअसल में ये डेटा जो है मुझे नहीं लगता कि ना जियो दे चुका है, ना सरकार दे रही है, ना हमारे पास है, लेकिन ये बात सच है कि मोबाइल फोन का जो पेनिट्रेशन है हिंदुस्तान में लगभग 100% का हो गया है, और जो डेटा प्लान्स जियो दे रहा है, मुझे लगता है कि जो आने वाली जो पीढ़ियां हैं और आज के दौर में जो यंग हैं वो पूरी तरह से इंटरनेट और व्हाट्सएप वगैरह को इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं, लेकिन ये ज़रूरी नहीं है कि ये लोग उस चीज़ की नेगेटिव चीज़ें से ज़्यादा प्रभावित, मतलब असर शायद उन पर उतना नहीं होगा, मतलब कि बहुत सारी चीज़ें जो मुझे मिलती हैं, किसी आंटी ने दे दिया, किसी दोस्त ने दे दिया, utter rubbish, somebody sent me, anyway you all get those forwards, so it's not, I think young people, मुझे लगता है कि जो नौजवान हैं शायद और जिम्मेदारी के साथ टेक्नोलॉजी का इस्तेमाल करना जानते हैं, और इतनी जो है वो इनोसेंस उनमें शायद नहीं है जितना कि जो older adapters of new technology. So I'm not, I wouldn't worry too much. I would say जियो का आना और सस्ते रेट में इंटरनेट मुहैया कराना अच्छी बात है, ये और होना चाहिए, फ़ोन स्मार्टफोन सबके पास होना चाहिए, डेटा प्लान सस्ता होना चाहिए, सिर्फ ये कि फ्री बेसिक्स और ये the kind of they should not be blocking of sites. So I don't want to, कल अगर जियो ये टेक्नोलॉजी वहाँ पे डाल दे कि वायर जो है वो नहीं खुलेगा, या अगर वायर जो है बहुत ही कम स्पीड से खुलेगा तो फिर वो नुकसान पहुंचाएगा, लेकिन अभी तक ऐसा कोई अंदेशा नहीं है कि जियो इस किस्म की चीज़ कर रही है, और जियो मुझे लगता है कि कहीं ना कहीं मुनाफा कमाने के बिजनेस में है, और अगर उनको लगे कि भाई वायर दिखाने से कमाई अच्छी हो रही है तो शायद वो कमाई भी कमाना चाहेंगे, ये मैं समझता हूँ कि अंबानीज अंडरस्टैंड बिजनेस. देयर वाज अ क्वेश्चन ऑन फर्स्ट पास्ट, सी यू आर राइट, मतलब कि फर्स्ट पास्ट द पोस्ट by any logic is a imperfect system, and but I think that we should give up any hope of this changing at any time in the near future, and certainly BJP won't bring it, and whoever defeats BJP will have no incentive. In any case, the requirements in terms of constitutional amendment or whatever it is that will do are so onerous that I don't foresee any prospect of this, and the fact is that there is no debate even. मतलब जिस तरह से एक डिबेट होनी चाहिए सियासी दलों में, पार्टीज में, कोई भी पार्टी भी शायद फर्स्ट पास्ट द पोस्ट से दूर नहीं निकलना चाहता, मतलब कि कांग्रेस पार्टी से अगर आप पूछिए, कम्युनिस्ट पार्टियों से पूछिए, किसी से भी पूछिए, कोई अभी तैयार नहीं है. सब कहते हैं कि हाँ लॉ कमीशन एक रिपोर्ट तैयार करे, स्टैंडिंग कमेटी में बात हो सकती है, लेकिन एक प्रेफरेंशियल वोटिंग सिस्टम, मतलब आइडियल सिस्टम वुड बी ए ट्रांसफरेबल single transferable vote, so you can rank your preference, and अगर आपका पसंदीदा कैंडिडेट पहले ही रेस में से लुढ़क जाता है तो वो वोट जो है किसी दूसरे को चला जाता है. इस किस्म की आप डिजाइन कर सकते हैं, लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि इसकी गुंजाइश आज के दिन में जीरो है, और ये मतलब इस पे डिस्कशन होना चाहिए ऐसे मीटिंग्स में, लेकिन जो सियासतदान हैं वो बिल्कुल नहीं चाहते कि इससे, क्योंकि फर्स्ट पास्ट द पोस्ट सिस्टम को अच्छी तरह समझते हैं, वो इसको कैसे इस्तेमाल किया जाए वो समझते हैं, जानते हैं, और इनको पता है कि अगर हम सिर्फ 31% या 32% वोट से सत्ता, मतलब सारा कुछ हमको मिल जाए तो वो समझते हैं कि यही अच्छा रास्ता है. सो आई थिंक दैट दिस इज आई एम विद यू इन थियरी, but in practice I think this is a non-starter. Have I forgotten any question? Diaspora. Yes, so we've tried, I mean in the sense that we've run pieces, I think the diaspora comes in all shapes and sizes. Hamare sabse, Vinod Dua is a very popular presence on the wire, and I have to say that the huge amount of views that he gets is from the diaspora. A lot of Indians in Gulf, in Saudi Arab, वहाँ से बकायदा हमको चिट्ठियाँ मिलती हैं, संदेश ईमेल से, we get messages from people, Indians always abroad saying we want to donate money, but we're not able to use our foreign credit card for that, etc., etc. So I would say that there's a section of the diaspora in the UK and the US, maybe in some other countries, that is, and maybe a lot of people, which is Hindutva oriented. And a lot of people have that, they're not very political and they feel ki here's the Prime Minister who is being applauded by the FT and New York Times, so they'll go to those Wembley Stadium and go, Modi, Modi, this kind of mindless, there is that element which, sooner or later they will realize. And I suspect even today, the impression in the diaspora will perhaps not be as fulsome as it was 4 years ago, because for starters, many of these people lost money in the demonetization. I mean, I keep meeting Indians abroad who have it's not as if they took it outside, but they kept 10,000 locked in an Almira somewhere, and such a mindless decision. Everybody knows, even the deepest supporter of the BJP knows that this is a completely moronic, mindless decision that was taken with no logic, was the product of a completely dysfunctional decision-making system where nobody wants to challenge what the leader believes. So I think somewhere down the line, even the diaspora will see logic in this. I'm worried about, we're running a piece of Badri Raina on how there's a famous poem of Bertolt Brecht where he says that the government, the people have lost the confidence of the government, and it's not so, rather than the other way around, and now it's time to maybe dissolve the people and elect a new one. So Badri Raina is talking about how under the current many of the policies of the BJP are aimed at altering the electorate. So he sees NRC as one such step, and they're looking to give the vote to NRIs. Now it's interesting that internal migrants, like you can be a worker, a brick worker, who migrates from Odisha, works in a construction site somewhere, or works in a brick kiln in Tamil Nadu. You don't have the right to vote, and there's no legislation being envisaged to give the internal migrant a right to vote. But there is talk of giving NRIs the right to vote, because the BJP's calculation is that this vote will come in our favor. So this is their calculation, but I think it may not well work in the way that they think, because I think there is a large section of the diaspora that is also progressive, that is imbibed, that feels for India, and is also imbibed democratic, norms. They look at the struggle, say in America, of African American Americans, or and are associated with those struggles, and are not. I mean, Indians traditionally in America are anyway pro-democrat. So for them to, so it's a kind of complicated equation. But for us, that 85% of our readers are within India, and 15% of the Wires readers come from across the world, of which more than half of that 15% is in the US. So it's a major chunk, and we get a lot of support from Indians who are abroad, and we are very, very happy to cater to their interests.
I don't think I need to conclude what you said. I think it was very clear, and thank you so much for the talk. Though, as concluding remarks from my side, I would like to go back to what he said about, Hinduism or Hindutva. And I think it's a very important moment for a gathering like this to reflect upon that kind of a question. What kind of a public sphere are we imagining? And in that sense, this liberal left civil society right now needs to confront Brahminism, needs to confront socio-economic capital, and recognize that there exist counter-publics, there exist counter-cultures that have huge histories, and it is time for us to learn from them. It is time for us to learn from, learn and extend solidarities to social movements and participate in them. And on this note, I would like to end this discussion. Thank you so much.
And do go to the Wire site and click on the donate button. That's very important.